I always knew Blueface was pretty stupid. I'm gonna tell you why. Blueface is signed to Wack100 and managed by Wack100. Let me tell you how this works. When you sign to a label, they take at least half already. Then you're getting managed by the guy who owns the label. So of your 50% that you're getting, or less than 50%, he's still taking at least 20% of that too. It's double dipping. You get what I'm saying?
I look at his wife at the time like, excuse me, man, like, would you insist on your son signing this right here? Like, like if I was your son, would you recommend this? She was like, yeah, I would. And I signed at that time. That was like my confirmation.
No lawyer, no nothing.
No lawyer, no nothing.
Okay.
Wack100 was meant to be Blueface's manager and business partner, but instead, he's been allegedly finessing him out of millions for years. Let's dive into how one of hip-hop's most controversial managers pulled off a massive industry scam right in plain sight. Wack100, born Cash Jones, is an industry veteran from Los Angeles who built a reputation in the streets before moving into music. He is best known for managing high-profile artists and consistently making headlines with his outspoken persona. While he's managed big names like The Game and Ray J, his partnership with Blueface stands out as perhaps his most lucrative and suspicious business move to date. On the other side, Blueface was just a young guy from LA who essentially stumbled into rap stardom. Born Jonathan Porter, he was still active in the streets when he went viral with Thoshana. At that moment, he had absolutely no experience with the music industry, complex contracts, or high-stakes business deals. He was essentially just a street guy who found a way to make rapping offbeat work for him. This made Blueface the ideal target for someone like Wack100. You had a young, naive artist who had just gone viral but had no management, no lawyer, and zero industry knowledge. He was generating money but had no idea how to protect his earnings or structure a proper deal. That's exactly when Wack100 stepped in. According to Blueface, Wack's daughter was actually the one who heard Thoshana and put her father onto the track. Wack100 then reached out via DMEs to set up a meeting, but Blueface was hesitant. When you Google Wack100, the results are filled with nothing but controversy and drama. Blueface admitted he was standoffish because of that reputation, saying that when you look him up, people only tell you crazy things about him. To make matters more complicated, Wack's past affiliations and nicknames clashed directly with Blueface's own background. Despite the tension, Wack100 didn't back down. He kept calling Blueface, trying to get him to come over for a meeting. Blueface continued to ignore him until a close friend finally convinced him to at least hear Wack out and see what he was offering. At this point, Blueface was handling everything, solo booking his own shows, shooting videos, and managing his own business affairs. Major labels like Atlantic and Empire were showing interest, but he felt there was a massive disconnect regarding his street background. When an executive at Atlantic asked if he was a Crip or a Blood, he realized these corporate figures simply didn't understand his world. One day, while Blueface was hanging out at a park in the hood, Wack100 started blowing up his phone again, insisting he come over. Blueface was reluctant, but Wack went as far as sending a car to pick him up. When Blueface arrived at Wack100's mansion, he was immediately impressed. He recalled thinking that when you see someone who has achieved that level of success, it commands a certain amount of respect. This was exactly what Wack100 intended, to use his wealth as a motivator, making Blueface believe Wack could get him to that same level. Here is where things take a dark turn. Wack100 already had the contract drafted and ready to go the moment Blueface walked through the door. The fact that legal documents were prepared before they even had a real business discussion is a major red flag for predatory behavior. However, the most manipulative moment was yet to come. Blueface looked at Wack100's wife and asked her directly, "If I were your son, would you recommend I sign this right now?" She looked him in the eye and said, "Yes."
I look at his wife at the time like, excuse me, man, like, would you insist on your son signing this right here? Like, like if I was your son, would you recommend this? She was like, yeah, I would. And I signed at that time. That was like my confirmation.
No lawyer, no nothing.
No lawyer, no nothing.
Okay.
Based on that one answer from Wack's wife, Blueface signed the contract on the spot. He had no lawyer present, no time to actually review the terms, and no real understanding of what he was committing to. He signed simply because he trusted that a mother wouldn't steer him the wrong way. Now, this is where Wack100's finesse game truly comes to light. The contract Blueface signed wasn't a standard management deal. It was a combined record and management deal. This setup allowed Wack100 to get paid twice from the exact same revenue streams. As the record label owner, Wack takes 50% of all music earnings right off the top. Then, in his role as manager, he takes another 20% of whatever is left. When you do the math, that's 70% of Blueface's income going directly to Wack. 100 DJ academics broke this down during a stream and called it exactly what it is.
I always knew Blueface was pretty stupid. I'm gonna tell you why. Blueface is signed to Wack100 and managed by Wack100. Let me tell you how this works. When you sign to a label, they take at least half already. Then you're getting managed by the guy who owns the label. So of your 50% that you're getting, or less than 50%, he's still taking at least 20% of that too. It's double dipping. You get what I'm saying?
In a standard industry setup, you either have a record deal or a management deal. You don't sign both with the same person. This is a massive conflict of interest because a manager's job is to negotiate the best possible terms for the artist. But how can a manager negotiate fairly when he's the one actually paying you? For perspective, most management deals sit around 15 to 20%, and most record deals involve a 50/50th revenue split after expenses are recovered. However, Wack100 structured this agreement so he gets the best of both worlds, leaving Blueface at a disadvantage from every angle. The worst part is that this isn't a short-term arrangement. These types of contracts usually span multiple albums and several years, meaning Wack100 has been pocketing 70% of Blueface's income for a long time, and will likely continue to do so for years to come. Looking at where things stand today, the results of this predatory contract are obvious. Blueface recently got out of jail and returned home broke. Just let that sink in. A guy who had multiple platinum records and was one of the biggest rappers on the planet just a few years ago is now struggling financially. Even the crab restaurant he was heavily promoting isn't doing well. When you're only bringing home 30% of your earnings, it's nearly impossible to build a sustainable business or make long-term investments. Instead, the bulk of his money has been going straight into Wack100's pockets. Reports are even circulating that Blueface is having to sell his house. This situation is a textbook example of how predatory contracts can completely dismantle an artist's financial future. While Wack100 lives in mansions and flashes his wealth on social media, the artist who actually created the music and built the brand is going broke. The most frustrating part is that Blueface is still trapped in this deal. Even if he tried to leave, these contracts are engineered to be almost impossible to break. Without paying massive penalties or enduring years of expensive legal battles, we have to remember that Blueface was young and inexperienced when he signed. He was about 21 years old, straight out of the streets with zero business savvy. Wack100 exploited that lack of knowledge and locked him into a deal that serves the manager far more than it serves the artist. This isn't just about Blue, it's about a recurring pattern in the music industry where seasoned businessmen prey on young, naive talent. They use psychological manipulation, flaunt their wealth, and create a false sense of urgency to pressure artists into signing deals without any legal representation. Looking back, there were countless red flags that should have been caught. Having a contract ready before negotiations even started, combining record and management roles, and rushing the process to avoid a legal review are all classic predatory tactics. Perhaps the most manipulative move of all was using Wack100's wife to validate the agreement. It was psychological manipulation at its peak, making the artist feel like he was receiving sincere family advice when in reality, he was being set up to be exploited. Industry knowledge is vital. This situation proves exactly why artists must educate themselves on the business side of music. If Blueface had understood basic contract terms or simply had a lawyer review the paperwork, he could have avoided this trap entirely. From Wack100's perspective, he likely feels justified because he did help Blueface navigate the industry and secure bigger bookings. However, taking 70% of someone's earnings is excessive by any standard, especially when that person is the one doing all the creative work. The power dynamic is completely lopsided. Wack100 effectively controls Blueface's career, his finances, and his business decisions. That isn't a partnership, it's ownership. When you own someone's career to that extent, you can essentially do whatever you want with their money. The most frustrating part for Blueface is that there is no easy way out. These contracts are designed to be ironclad. Breaking them usually requires paying back advances and legal fees, often totaling more money than the artist even has. So, while Blueface is struggling financially, selling his home, and facing legal issues, Wack100 continues to collect his 70% cut of everything Blueface produces. Over the years, that adds up to millions of dollars that should have stayed in the artist's pocket. The biggest lesson here is to never, ever sign a contract without having a lawyer review it first. It doesn't matter how much you trust the person or how good the deal looks on the surface, always seek independent legal advice before you sign anything. Many industry veterans position themselves as mentors or father figures to young artists. But in reality, they're just hunting for their next payday. True mentorship doesn't involve pocketing 70% of someone's earnings. Wack100's mansion and flashy lifestyle created an illusion, making Blueface believe he could reach that same level of success just by signing with him. What Blueface failed to realize, however, was that Wack's wealth was built by taking massive cuts from multiple artists over the years. The damage from these predatory contracts goes far beyond just money. When artists are unable to build wealth from their own success, they can't invest in their communities, provide for their families, or create generational wealth. It keeps them trapped and dependent on the very system that's exploiting them. Had Blueface been properly represented, a lawyer would have immediately flagged the issues with this contract structure. A solid entertainment attorney would have negotiated separate deals or, at the very least, significantly reduced those percentages. It all comes down to industry education. If there were better resources for new artists regarding contract terms and standards, Blueface would have known that a 70% split was outrageous, and that double dipping is fundamentally unethical. If Blueface had consulted with other artists experienced in management, they likely would have warned him about the red flags in this situation. Simply taking a few days to think about the offer and research industry standards could have saved him millions of dollars. That sense of urgency was artificial, manufactured by Wack100 specifically to prevent Blueface from making an informed decision. Keep in mind, Blueface already had interest from major labels like Atlantic and Empire. While those deals might not have been perfect, they almost certainly would have been more favorable than giving 70% of everything to one person. Today, Blueface is facing the harsh consequences of that signature, coming home from jail broke, struggling with his business ventures, and being forced to sell off assets all while Wack100 continues to profit from his labor. The irony here is that Blueface's success is exactly what made Wack100 wealthy, yet the contract structure prevented Blueface from building any sustainable wealth of his own. It's like working for a company where the boss gets rich while you stay broke, except you aren't allowed to quit. At this point, his options are incredibly limited. He could try to renegotiate, but Wack100 has zero incentive to give up such a massive 70% cut. He could try to break the contract, but the legal fees would likely cost more than he currently has. Alternatively, he can keep working under these terms and hope to generate enough volume to survive on just 30%. Beyond the financial strain, there's a significant psychological impact. When you know the vast majority of your earnings are going to someone else, it becomes incredibly difficult to stay motivated or creative at the highest level. Other artists in the industry are watching this unfold, and it serves as a massive cautionary tale about the importance of proper representation and understanding contract terms before ever picking up a pen. The dynamic between Wack100 and Blueface isn't a traditional manager-artist relationship. It functions more like an owner and an employee. Real managers work for their artists to help them maximize their income. They don't structure deals to maximize their own profits at the artist's expense. What we're seeing here is an extreme version of a 360 deal, where the label takes a piece of everything the artist touches. However, even the most aggressive 360 deals rarely reach a 70% split. That is simply excessive by any industry standard. If this kind of contract structure becomes normalized, it could set a dangerous precedent for how all young artists are treated in the music business. Other managers might start demanding similar terms, seeing that desperate artists are willing to accept them. These types of business disputes often destroy personal relationships as well. Blueface likely trusted Wack100 and viewed him as a mentor, only to realize he was being exploited the entire time. When an artist is unable to build wealth from their success, it affects their entire family. Blueface has children and relatives who should be benefiting from his hard work, but instead, the bulk of that money is going to Wack. The stress of financial instability, legal battles, and feeling trapped in a predatory contract can take a serious toll on someone's mental health. Success is supposed to bring security and peace of mind, not more problems. When you're only keeping 30% of your earnings, it's hard to stay motivated to create new music. It's difficult to put in maximum effort when you know someone else is reaping most of the rewards. The music industry clearly needs better regulations to protect young artists from these kinds of deals. There should be limits on how much managers and labels can take, especially from those with little experience. Implementing a mandatory waiting period or a legal review requirement for contracts involving high percentages could prevent these situations from happening in the future. This would prevent artists from making impulsive decisions that could sabotage their financial future. The industry needs to invest in education programs that teach creators about contract terms, industry standards, and business basics before they ever sign a deal. Peer support networks are also essential. Experienced artists should do more to mentor newcomers and warn them about common scams and predatory practices. There should also be transparency requirements. Contracts should be legally required to clearly state the total percentage being taken and compare it to industry standards, ensuring artists understand exactly what they are agreeing to. At the end of the day, Blueface is the real victim here. He was a young guy who struck gold with a viral hit, but instead of that success setting him up for life, it became a foundation for someone else to get rich off his labor. This isn't just about one bad contract. It's a systemic problem within the music industry where seasoned business people prey on the young and inexperienced. Until the system changes, we will continue to see these stories repeat themselves. It all highlights one vital truth: the absolute importance of education. The biggest takeaway here is that knowledge is power. If Blueface had understood basic contract terms and industry standards, he could have avoided this entire situation. Every young artist needs to educate themselves on the business side of music. You can trust people, but you must always verify what they're telling you through independent sources. Just because someone appears successful or trustworthy doesn't mean they actually have your best interests at heart. When making business decisions, you always have to consider the long-term consequences. A deal that feels like a win in the moment can end up costing you millions over the course of your career. Hopefully, situations like this will lead to positive changes within the industry. Perhaps future artists will be better protected, and predatory managers will face more scrutiny for their practices.